My guest today is Rudy Underwood. At 14, he unexpectedly lost his daddy. He quickly had to become the man of the house, growing up on a small farm in rural Georgia that was owned by someone else. He did what he had to do to survive and help his very determined mother, who inspired him to dream big, build large fires in life, and most of all, to trust God. His journey took him from Reynolds, Georgia, to the University of Georgia, to Washington, D.C., with a few delightful and sometimes difficult detours along the way. Earlier this year, at the top of his career, he retired and is now back home in Marietta, Georgia, with his bride, Carol. Together, they are now determined to do whatever it is grandparents do, to be present and to make sure their grandchildren dream big and build large fires and trust God. Besides children and grandchildren things, I would also bet there will be some leisurely travel in Rudy and Carol's plans. You will hear Rudy mention sitting in his office when he first got to Washington, D.C., overlooking the United States Capitol from his window, and being asked if he ever dreamed this situation would ever be in his future. You will hear his answer to that question. I did not ask him if he ever dreamed there would be a resolution presented in the United States House of Representatives by a sitting United States congressman in his honor as he was on his way out. Rudy's story is one that makes parents in heaven look down and smile. But it is also a story that reminds us that whatever the mind can conceive, one can achieve. And no matter your place in life, whatever you do, don't ever stop dreaming.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate the achievements of Rudy Underwood, a Georgia native. Underwood, the former American Chemistry Council Vice President of State Affairs and Political Mobilization, has recently retired after 31 years with the ACC. Mr. Underwood joined the American Chemistry Council in 1992 as the Managing Director of ACC's Southern Regional Office in Atlanta. In 2015, Underwood was appointed Vice President of State Affairs and Political Mobilization. The ACC's mission is to advocate for the people, policy, and products of chemistry that make the United States the global leader in innovation and manufacturing. His work to champion smart policies has helped create and save chemical and plastics industry jobs, and it has raised awareness of the critical role chemistry plays in improving the lives of Americans across the country. Congratulations, Mr. Underwood, on your achievement and on your well-deserved retirement.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.
This is Bruce Goddard, and you're listening to the View from a Hearse podcast. My guest today he's my brother-in-law. He's my fraternity brother. He's a fellow Georgia dog. He's my travel buddy, and we've been lifelong friends. Rudy Underwood. Rudy, thank you for doing this. I've been trying to get him on for a while. He's hard to catch. So, Rudy, I'm glad to have you on this podcast today.
Bruce, I'm excited to be here.
I know you've got a story to tell, and if I can just get it out of you, Rudy is not one to toot his own horn. I know him as well as anybody, but I think it's important to record his story, not only for all of you listeners, but for his family, his grandkids that are growing up, to get to hear his voice and to tell a little bit about his life and where he came from and what he got to do. But where he is right now, he is recently retired, effectively at the beginning of the year. You retired after an incredible career, and so I know, even in conversations with you, that's been quite a transition for you. So talk a little bit about that. How are you adjusting to, after being on the go all over the country every week, to being retired?
Well, it is an adjustment. I do appreciate more and more being at home and sleeping in my own bed every night. But going from having every minute of my day planned to now essentially just planning what I want to do, it's a change. I mean, it's not only a change that for me, it's also a change for my wife and my family
Right.
because my wife's not, she's not normally seeing me Tuesday through Thursday, but now she sees me every day, and much times it's all day long those days.
If people don't realize, for especially somebody like Rudy, he had a lot of responsibility. He was running and gunning, and like he said, his days were planned, his minutes were planned, his hours were planned, and all of a sudden be home, and you look up and say, "What am I going to do now?" And so a lot of people have walked where you walked. Let's just talk about what you've been doing, and especially for the last several years, and the importance of what you do.
What I do effectively is all my career, professional career, I've been a lobbyist. I know when I say that, some people might immediately turn out because of the connotations that the term lobbyist brings. But it is a profession. It's not much different from being an accountant or chiropractor or whatever it is. It is a career. It's a career path that I entered early on and spent almost 40 years doing it. Every person, whether you're a farmer or you are an insurance agent or you are a school teacher or you are a funeral director, there is an association that represents you before governmental agencies and regulatory bodies. I represented the chemical and plastics industries for the past 31 years, 20 of those years only in the Southeast. And in the last 10 years, I led the national team, so I was engaged throughout the country. And one of the things that was noted about America back in the 1800s, when the Europeans looked at our government structure, they said, one of the most unique things about the republic that they created was that they had a voice for the people, and it was through collective bodies, associations, special groups, and they were able to petition the government and represent the interest of a group. And that's essentially what I've provided, that third voice to the executive branch and the legislative branch of how a policy will affect an industry. Obviously, the goal was to make sure they understood the policies so the industry could thrive and make the innovative products that our industry provides to not only America, but all across the world.
To be a lobbyist, you got to have relationships, and you have been a professional relationship builder as well. But I remember when you moved your office to Washington, and all of a sudden you were maintaining two homes. You kept your home in Marietta, and Carol would come back and forth to Washington some. You would, I guess, came home about every weekend from Washington, so you were commuting there. But talk about doing that, just the craziness of maintaining two residences that far apart. Just talk a little bit about that.
At the beginning, when I first had the opportunity to take on this new role, kids were grown, married, and so Carol said, "Hey, let's go. Let's do this." So we picked out a place in D.C., matter of fact, a little townhouse. It was a block and a half from the office, 4 blocks from the U.S. Capitol, just almost a perfect location to spend some time in Washington, D.C. And for a couple of years, that worked out great. We would go up to D.C. and spend month and a half, 2 months, and then we'd come home for a quick trip just to visit around. But then we had grandkids. And Carol essentially said, I need to take care of grandkids. And so I started commuting every week. So I'd fly up normally on Monday night and then fly home usually Fridays until COVID hit. And then obviously things changed. So the office in D.C. was only open Tuesday through Thursday. So I would come home on Thursday evenings. We had what I call a lock and leave in D.C. When I left, and it didn't matter if I came back next week or I came back in 3 weeks, nothing changed. The thing is, though, Bruce, and I'll never forget, one of the first times when I got to the D.C. office, and I had a friend came in, and he had known me most of my life, and he said, "Rudy, did you ever dream that someday you would be sitting here, you could look out your window, and you could see the U.S. Capitol? And that would be your job?" And I was like, when I grew up in Reynolds, Georgia, on that little small farm that actually wasn't not even our farm, only thing I could do was dream. And so I did dream of a moment like that. I didn't know if I was going to be a preacher or a politician, but I did be somewhere in between, I guess.
Wow. Yep, you did. Another thing that you've done And we're going to get more into that growing up in a little bit. We're going to talk about it. But you retired at the top of your game. And this is not a political discussion, but you look at really both sides of the aisle. Mitch McConnell just finally stepped down. You got the president. You got people that have really done their jobs past their prime, where they're not as effective. And you retiring at the top of your game, you certainly have the mind power and the willpower. You could have kept going. But that had to be a difficult decision. Talk about the decision to retire when you had everything wide open going your way.
That last rung in the ladder is when you feel like you've caught the bus. Everything you do is better. Your network's better. The people you work with better. Have built a team. But I entered it two things. One is I looked at the calendar, and the calendar doesn't lie. I got older. And I also looked and saw people like you just mentioned that were staying in jobs way past their prime. You start declining one, but you just have no opportunity to be with your family and do some of the things that you wanted to do. And that's, Carol and I sat down, we prayed a lot about it. And you're right, I could have been in my job for another couple of years easily. Right now, we got good health, still pretty sharp mind. And obviously, what I did professionally, I was kind of at the top of my game. But I decided I wanted to be at home. I wanted to be playing ball with my grandkids. I wanted to go to the games somewhat like I was able to do with when our kids were growing up. So it was time. It was time to do it. It was time for Carol and I to have an opportunity to do things. We're going to the Braves spring training in a couple of weeks. So going and we're taking up some trips with some of our friends. Great career. Everybody's replaceable, Bruce. We may think that, we got that big plus job in the corner office. Something happens to us or bus runs over us. Somebody's going to be in that seat in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
They're going to replace us.
Yeah.
Might not be just like us, but where we can't be replaced is with our families.
Right.
I wanted my grandkids to know me. I just didn't want them to read about me or, oh, my granddaddy was this and that. I wanted to know me. I wanted them to know how I make them feel. And hopefully that will be a lasting impression.
You got one life, and I had to make that same decision several years ago. A lot of people don't do that. A lot of people don't have the opportunity to do it, but some choose to, when they do have the opportunity, not to do it. Maybe if you're listening, you may want to think about it. I am an undertaker, and you got one shot at this life. I can promise you I've seen that real well. Rudy, one of the things that has caused me to smile, I guess part of it, watching my smiling, is seeing some of the tears that you've had as you, I guess almost all last year, you were kind of on a goodbye tour as you travel around the country. I saw you honored at a bunch of different places. You got to talk a little bit about how that impacted you.
It was very sobering and humbling. I always work from the mindset that you have no limit in what you can do if you don't care who gets the credit for it. So everything I try to do was really empower people to get things done and accomplish things. Officially, it was only 6 months, where after the announcement was made of me retiring, I started getting invites from really all over the country. People saying, hey, come to speak to our group one last time. And just hearing the comments of how I made people feel was astounding to me. We accomplished things together. I never tried to want to say, hey, I'll accomplish that. But together we accomplished a lot of great things. And people were sharing some of those things. And they were sharing some of the things that they learned from me or they saw me do. And it kind of made them smile. So I did get a comment from someone that said, if you go to one more event, you're going to have the complete University of Georgia football outfit. Because it seemed like everywhere I went, everybody knew my attachment to the University of Georgia. And they would give me something, a helmet, a football. I have my own jersey and all these kind of things. And so it was neat to see that.
Yeah, it was emotional even to watch some of it. I obviously didn't see. You sent a couple of videos to your sister that I got to see.
Yeah.
I know it was emotional. I know, speaking of that, there were a couple of pictures I saw. They gave you a specialty drink called a Diet Coke with a lemon twist or a lime twist maybe. What was that about?
Because of my faith, one of the things I don't do is I don't drink alcohol. I learned that from my parents. I didn't drink through college, and it kind of went into my professional career, even though I was constantly entertaining people. If I was late for dinner, there was a Diet Coke waiting on me when I got there. So they knew that was kind of my thing. They got a glass of wine, Rudy got a Diet Coke. And hopefully it was part of my ministry of telling people that, all these things that we do, we can do it with a sober mind, and we don't have to have things to change our mindset in order to just get along and talk to people. Yeah, it was kind of fun. My whole staff teases me about it all the time, Diet Coke, even though recently I've kind of changed to unsweet tea, but I definitely drank a lot of Diet Cokes during my career.
That's great. And that's true. It's true. Let's go back and talk about, you mentioned your parents and what you learned. Let's talk about what it was like for you growing up. You had 3 sisters, obviously. I know them all well. Very rural setting. Just talk a little bit about growing up. What was it like for Rudy to grow up?
It started off very typical, just like about any little boy growing up in middle South Georgia. Mom and a daddy, and we lived in a little house and started doing things. But things changed when I was 14. When I was 14, my father passed away. I became the man of the family, so to speak. But I lost something that a lot of young men get, and that's the relationship with their father. The older I get, the fainter the memories become. And I wish I just had 4 more minutes with him. I miss his, he had a big handshake, contagious laugh, big smile. He was always, cutting up and teasing people. I can remember that. And I can remember the fact that anytime there was a project to do around the farm, I was his right-hand man. I learned later in life that he actually didn't need me to accomplish those things, and he actually brought me in to help be with me, spend time with me, and help me. But losing him, that put all the burden on my mother to, I guess, kind of teach me to be a man. And she tried. She did. She did everything she can to try to fill that role of a father. And one of the things she did was she would send me notes. I think she plagiarized and copied them from someplace, but I'd go down to the Lampica house and I have a letter from Mama, and it would be just a letter of encouragement that would be quotes and things of that nature that I think she was trying to overcompensate, because I don't think she did it with my sisters as much as she did me, but it was different. We were extremely poor. I did not know that until I got to the University of Georgia. When I got to Georgia, my dorm had more people than Reynolds.
Right.
So it was an overwhelming thing for me. But again, I think it really helped me understand the value, one, of relationships, and it created the attribution of knowing that I needed to work. And I'll never forget, first job was when I was 12 years old. Daddy took me up to Wainwright's packing shed, and 30 minutes later, I was in the back of a peach truck. So beginning with the summer when I was 12, I've been doing something work-related, doing a tax reform every year since then.
I came along, I guess, when you were 13, so I knew you before then, but not nearly as I did after that. You learned during those times after your daddy died, you learned how to fix anything. You can fix anything. You were the only person around. It was no YouTube. I don't know how you learned all that. I know your daddy taught you some of it before he died. He was 48, or was he 49 when he died?
Yeah.
You learned to do a little bit of everything. You're very good with your hands. You can fix anything. You love to do that. You were definitely intentionally being the man of the house. I remember watching you.
I didn't have any other choice. 3 sisters, my mother. I think even all our dogs were females. I don't know. But a lot of emotions around the house. But the one thing, either I had to do it or I just wanted to get out of the house. But like, I totally replumbed the house. I had to get up under there and chase all the snakes away and do the plumbing and work on the well. I did have horses, and that was kind of one of my things where I could, kind of clear my head. And I would ride my horse just about every day. And one day I would be preaching, and the next day I'd be the president.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of started kind of my interest in being external person. So yeah, we're growing up in Reynolds, growing up on that little farm, even having the more difficult situation of losing your father. I think all that kind of helped shape me and mold me into being a better person.
Yep.
And that's what I try to be throughout my career.
There's no question that that is true. And you mentioned your mom. Your mom sent you letters of encouragement and all of that, but she worked her butt off. She worked 2 jobs. She never quit. She got up early. She went to bed late. She sacrificed a lot for all of you. You know, all of you turned out really well. Your dad somewhere is looking up from heaven and smiling. I can tell you that. When all that happened, it had to be touch and go of how this would turn out. Your mother was amazing, and she was my mother-in-law for a lot of years. Yeah. She demanded a lot from all of you. Right.
I think you helped me rake the yard a couple of times.
I did. And I would get home and my mama would say, "Why don't you rake our yard?" And I said, "Well, because Miss Irene told me to rake it. You didn't." So,
ironically, my mother retired at age 65 too. At least we thought. And I got a call. She said, "Rudy, I'm thinking about taking this job at a place called the Georgia Center," which was a kind of a detention home for young people. And I said, "Really?" And so she took that job at age 65. A couple months later, I tried to call her and she didn't answer. So I finally got her and I said, "Mom, where were you?" She said, "I worked a double shift." She said, "I worked my day shift, then I worked night shift last night." And I'm like, "You're 70 years old and you worked a double shift in a children's home managing young teenage boys."
And physically manage them. She would have to hold them down sometimes. It was not just an office job manage them, right? It was supposed to be, but it was much more. Yeah.
I learned to work hard from her, and I also learned the value of prayer. She would pray like nobody else I could see. I mean, I would see her late in life. She'd be on her knees every night and saying prayers. Yeah, there's definitely a lot I learned from her. She drilled this in my head. It's not your IQ, it's your I do. She's saying, look, it doesn't matter how smart you are, as long as you will do, you'll be successful. She said, don't build a little fire, you need to build a big fire, because people don't get it warmed up with a small fire. You need to build a big fire. So I always felt like she was challenging me to do big things, always dream, always looking at what I could do to make things better.
And, you mentioned something in her praying. She began praying like that because she was desperate. Until you're desperate for him, you'll never pray like that. And I think you learn that different ways. But she was desperate. She knew she needed an intervention for her kids to be successful, and God answered her prayers. If you are an answer to her prayer, as are your siblings, there's no question about that. One of the things that Rudy, most people won't know, before your dad died and your granddaddy too, the Underwoods were in politics. Your daddy was in the Georgia House of Representatives. Your granddaddy, Papa Underwood, was in the House of Representatives. And so you were, even as a young boy, you were around politics. And not only that, your family friend, your great friend of your daddy's, Garland Byrd, ended up to be lieutenant governor. So just talk about this, that had something to do with your just getting in this political arena that you've been in all your life.
I'll never forget Dad telling me years ago that politics was like cancer. Once it got into your body, you couldn't get rid of it. And I think I caught the bug early on. I'm told that at age 3 that I rode my tricycle up and down the street passing out flyers for Dad, who was a state legislator during re-election. I think it was 1962. The Georgia gubernatorial election was, for the first time ever, was undecided. And so the legislature, when they came into session, was going to have to make a decision. The political mind I wrote to Santa Claus to ask him who would be the next governor. Would it be Democrat Luster Maddox or Republican Bo Calloway? Come to find out, a friend of ours, a guy named Tom Cochran, penned the Santa Claus answer. And he told me at the time, the letter from Santa Claus, that Luster Maddox would be the next governor because he was a Democrat, and that all good little boys grew up to be Democrats. Luster Maddox did become the governor. I'm not sure I can say I grew up to be a Democrat, but I try to put politics aside.
That is great. You got your answer, and Tom Crockett went out on a limb to say he was going to be the governor too, right? I don't know what would have happened if Santa Claus had given you a wrong answer. You'd have felt bad about Santa Claus.
Well, I think Tom knew that the Georgia legislature was democratically controlled at the time, and he knew what the answer was going to be.
So you graduated from high school. You went to Taylor County. You played on the first football team ever existed at Taylor County High School. I know you were a running back or fullback, but you also was a place kicker. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget the night in Athens that I got news that you had broken your leg. And so I guess that ended your football for that year anyway, right?
Well, it did. That was my sophomore year, and I was a running back. And, I did. I crushed my leg pretty good that night. I was in a cast for 6 months, which meant that I couldn't participate in sports. And I was scared I wasn't going to get to play in the spring game. So even though I was in a cast, I wasn't going to be able to go out and do the tackling and all that kind of stuff. What I could do, though, is I could practice place kicking. And even though I wasn't a kicker, that was the only chance that I was going to get to play in that spring game because they wouldn't let me have contact. So I told the coach that's what I was going to do. He said, Rudy, if you can prove to me you can do it, I'll let you kick. And so I got to do that. The spring game, my junior year, I did return, but the only thing I returned to do was be the place kicker. And then I became the place kicker for the next couple of years while I was in high school.
That's amazing. You were also valedictorian of your high school, right?
Nah, salutatorian.
Oh, were you? Okay.
But there's a big but there.
Okay.
I thought I was smart. Again, I got to the University of Georgia, and I learned that was not true. So I don't know if it was not. I don't know if it was because I wasn't that smart, because I just really had no idea how to study. But my first quarter at the University of Georgia was not totally successful grade-wise. But I did get to stay in school.
Well, I can tell you my first quarter at Georgia wasn't successful. It may have been for different reasons than you, but a lot of people go through that when they go. But you had a great run at UGA. I mentioned earlier that we were fraternity brothers, so Reynolds, Georgia, had a little connection with the Lambda Chi fraternity house. Jim Watley's married to Rudy's oldest sister. He was a Lambda Chi. His older sister was a sweetheart of Lambda Chi before that. She married a Lambda Chi. My brother George was a Lambda Chi. I came along, became a Lambda Chi, and then Rudy followed. Rudy came in as I was graduating. I'm about 4 years older. So we had quite a run there. But you also had a stellar career. You started off the way you said, but you ended up in the Gridiron Society at Georgia. You've been honored in a lot of places there. Just talk about your lifelong love affair with the University of Georgia.
Well, Bruce, I didn't know at the time. Only thing I knew when I was in high school is I saw what Jim Watley and you, and it was the only thing in my mind was going to the University of Georgia. So I got the chance to go. The degree is the degree. I mean, I actually got undergrad and a master's there. But it's the relationships and connections I made at the University of Georgia that have been in my path ever since I left the school. Connections from there got me to work with Senator Herman Talmadge in D.C. until he was defeated. I came back, got a job at University of Georgia Alumni Association through some UGA contacts. From there, I went to the Georgia Farm Bureau through another UGA contact. And from Farm Bureau, I ended up where I am now through another UGA contact. So it has been part of my past, part of my history, part of my success has been that linkage to the University of Georgia. It's part of who I am. I mean, I bleed red and black. I met Carol, my wife, at University of Georgia. Both of our daughters went to the University of Georgia. Both of our daughters met and married folks from the University of Georgia. Of the six of us in my family, 6 adults, 9 of us, we got 9 degrees from the University of Georgia. So it's a big part of our lives. And obviously, I love Georgia football, baseball, everything about Georgia is part of me.
Yeah, you're right. The relationships you build, you don't know it then, you know it later.
No. It's 4 years. Think about what 4 years in your lifetime of, say, 80 years is.
Right.
But there's so much packed in those 4 years that just either create who you are as a person for the future, or not.
It's formative years. It's years that matter. It's years where you're about to figure out who you are. And so I think that too is why it's important. It's just they are very important years in a person's life when you're from whatever you are, 18 to 21 or 22 or 23 or whatever it is. They're 4 years, but they're important years. You mentioned Carol. I want to talk about you and Carol. She was a Zeta across the street from the Lambda Chi house. You know, if you hadn't joined Lambda Chi, there's a good chance you'd have never met Carol. Talk about Carol and the importance she's been to your success.
And I can think back through my career. I think about other things of what I would call kind of God moments, things that just occurred that you can say it was chance, but I think it was more preordained than that. Like Carol and I met at a function that I was not supposed to be at. She was a pledge. And so there was a pledge social between Zetas and Lambda Chi pledges. And I lived in the house. And so I'd come back from studying and I just kind of walked through this activity that was going on, kind of a social dance, or whatever you call it. And I saw Carol and I went over and spoke to her, had no idea who she was. And then subsequent with that, I started talking to some of her shorty friends that I knew and said, who was that girl? I really would like to meet her and possibly date her. So we met totally unexpected, totally unplanned, totally wasn't even supposed to happen. And then from that day forward, we've been somewhat a couple. We've had some in and outs while we're in school, but I think we will be married 42 years later this year.
Yeah, and she's held down the fort when you were all over everywhere, just been patiently waiting. So speaking of Carol just walked in the room, and I'm going to grab her just for a second.
You want to sit down somewhere and do it?
Okay.
He's just going to ask you a quick question. I don't even know what the question is, but so far they haven't been very hard to answer.
Carol, you didn't get to hear it, but Rudy just talked about how he met you, and he kind of bragged on you a little bit, so don't say anything bad. But I got to ask you, he's been working a long time. He's been traveling all over everywhere. What is it like having him home all of a sudden? I know you're adjusting like he is, so just talk about that a little bit.
Yes, it is an adjustment because he was gone usually 2-3 nights a week at least. And so I kind of have done my own thing. So now with him home, we're kind of trying to coordinate meals. And the best thing is he's taking out the trash now because I used to have to take out the trash.
That's fun.
But he decided, I've always done all the laundry. He decided he was going to do his own clothes. So we've got 2 laundry baskets and he's washing his clothes. Just daily, what are you doing today? What are you doing? Just trying to keep up with our schedules.
But it's fun time though, isn't it?
It is fun. It's fun to have things to do and go do them, but separately if we want, but it's really nice to have him home every night.
Yeah, well, that's what you worked for all your life. That's what he worked for, and that's what you have put up with all your life to have this time. Thank God you're healthy and you can enjoy it, so y'all keep having fun. Carol, thank you, dear.
Thank you, Bruce.
Folks, that was Carol Underwood, and you have been listening to her husband, Rudy. He is about to talk about their children and a little about what they have accomplished. You may want to pull out a pen because he'll also give you some pointers about what he has learned about success, including some of what he learned when things for them went wrong. You don't want to miss this. We'll be right back. I know your 2 girls have been such a wonderful gift to you. And just talk about Courtney and Claire just a minute and their husbands. You mentioned they met them at Georgia, but I know you're proud of those girls.
We are, and again, none of those things were straight line happenings. They all had some special uniqueness to them. You can only say that it was a God thing that brought them together. Courtney's the oldest. She had a great high school career. Went to Georgia, became a Zeta. I never forget. She called me one day and she said, "Dad, it was going through that tremendous pressure thing they call rush." And she said, "I can't choose between Zeta or AKO." And I said, "Courtney, you can't choose." She said, "Yeah, it's dead even, Dad, dead even. I can't decide." And I said, "If I recall, your mother was a Zeta." And she's like, it was like a light bulb went off. She said, "You're right." So she went to be a Zeta. She actually, became president of Zeta, political science major, went to graduate school, got her master's in teaching, and she's been a teacher. She met David Dove, our son-in-law, who they were both political science majors, studied together, never dated until Courtney broke up with a guy she'd been dating for several years. They said, "Hey, maybe we should try dating." So they tried dating and then got married. David's a great guy. He's been working with Governor Kemp as his executive counsel. He just left that and now's in private practice. Claire, our younger daughter, she went to the University of Georgia also. She also was a Zeta. And she was what's called a Foundation Fellow, which is one of the top honors at Georgia. You get a full ride scholarship, plus you get study abroad stipends during the summers. She took full advantage of that. But she also met Ben Haley. Claire never dated in high school. And as far as we knew, she didn't date much when she got to college, other than, when she'd have to have a date like to a dance. But she started attending this like Bible study at this guy's house. It wasn't anything serious. He has a girlfriend, yada. And then come to find out, it was a lot more than that. And they were becoming good friends. And they had been married. And Claire ended up going to med school. So she's a ER doctor just south of Nashville in Thompson Station, Tennessee. And Ben works for the FDIC. He is one of 6 crypto experts in the country. So anything in the banking community has to deal with crypto, Ben gets called in on it. So kind of a new deal.
Well, I knew what he did, but I didn't know about the crypto. Wow.
Yeah.
You got 4 grandchildren, and I know that's keeping you guys wide open, and you just getting started good with that, right? Being recently retired.
3 grandsons and a granddaughter. And they're exciting. Matter of fact, we're going to pick up one of them in a little bit from school, and he's wanting to hang out with Papa Roo and Cece this afternoon. His brother did it a couple of weeks ago, and he's reminded us ever since that it's his turn. So yes, we are definitely in the grandparent era right now, and really love it.
It's a good era to be in. Rudy, when you think about your success, not only your career, but with your family, there's got to be, I'm sure you've thought about it, a few keys to what you think contributed to your success.
I mean, I've named some of them: the University of Georgia, friends, networks, communications, my mom, those letters, if you don't live out your dreams, you'll be living the dreams of others. Dream big or don't dream at all. Those will be the little notes coming from mom. But as I've gone through kind of my career, I have come across a few things that I think to me have been inspirational, have guided me. When I was leaving, I actually got I call it a challenge coin. The military has these challenge coins that a lot of the different battalions have to kind of give to their members to commemorate things. So I thought, well, I'm going to do this. So if no one ever remembers who I am, maybe they'll see that coin someday and they'll think, oh, I remember that guy. But so I tried to put some of that in there. One is, you should approach life and your job is to never saying it's not my job. If someone approaches you and say, hey, I need this get done, and don't say it's not my job. Right. Either do it or find someone that can do it, but take up that banner.
Right.
It's my job. Second thing is never say I wish I had. I think that is, you have the opportunities in life. Try not to ever look back and say I wish I had done that, because you had the opportunity to do it, and do it. Never say, I wish I had. So never say it's not my job. Never say, I wish I had. I think are two good guiding principles. But also, for me, I think there are certain characteristics you must have. One is you got to be ethical in everything you do. You need to be humble. Nothing is accomplished by an individual. It's always a team of people. It's always a collaborative effort. You got to be passionate about whatever. If you're not passionate about your job, you're not in the right job. And I tell people that all the time. If you're not, if you're working for me and you're not passionate, you need to be finding another job. Be intentional. Everything you do, it's got to be intentional. Just don't let it be happenstance. Plan it, be ready for it, and make it sure it's intentional. You got to be courageous. If you don't step out on a limb, you're not going to be making a difference. There's always this demon of doubt that will get in your brain and say, oh, you can't do that. You got to be courageous and approach things and get things done. And then the last thing I would say that has guided me is I always try to be grateful. Again, people help you do things. You never accomplish things by yourself. And you got to make sure people understand, you thank them, you be grateful to them, express that. One of the Bible scriptures that I always look to is Joshua 1:9. Essentially what that says is God will be with you wherever you go. So don't worry about the future, because God's going to be there. He's in control of that. And wherever you go in life, God will be there with you. And I've always relied upon that, whether I was growing up in Reynolds or at the University of Georgia or working in the state of Georgia or in the Southeast or even at Washington, is I knew that there was someone that always had my back. And I kind of leaned into all those principles as throughout my career.
When somebody understands that, it changes everything. If you really believe that God has your back, He goes before you. When things not going your way, which it happens to everybody goes through that. If you don't have that steadfast knowledge that there's a God in control and He's not surprised at anything, if you don't have that, you get in trouble in a hurry. That's true. Rudy, if you look back over your life and your career, is anything you change at this point?
Bruce, I kind of jumped over it from Farm Bureau to working for the chemical industry, but there was about a 2-year slot in time when I would want to do it over, but the lessons I learned was so incredible. When I was at the Farm Bureau, I had an opportunity to join a firm called Coning Wolf in Atlanta, big PR firm. They brought me in to establish a public affairs division. So that was me. I came in, we established it. 6 months in, I had my full team fully billable. But it was also the beginning of what I call Bush 1 recession. It was almost like the economic engine of America stopped. And the first thing people stopped was hiring PR firms.
Right.
So CEO called me in and said, Rudy, you're doing a tremendous job here. But unfortunately, we got to collapse that new division we just created. We will do as much for you as we can. I had to go home that day and tell my wife that this dream job that I accepted 6 months ago, that tripled our income, that we prayed about extensively, had come to an abrupt end. I was really down. But looking back, I can see God provided us. He gave me work. The entire time that I was, quote, without a job, I was picking up contracts. I was doing what I was born to do or wanting to do. And we had more income than we needed. I made more income that year kind of working on my own. It took me like the next 6 years to catch up to. But we relocated from Macon to Marietta. Just bought a brand new house. Looking back, Carol's dad had bypass surgery. While he was out with that, his mom broke her leg. So we were there to take care of them. And all the other little things that we thought were horrible were just distractions. God was putting us in positions to, one, take care of our parents. One, to get our girls in good schools. And then He provided an unbelievable job that led to a 31-year career.
Folks, if you're in that place that Rudy was and things are not going your way, keep on trucking. You never know. You can't see the big picture. God sees it from a different perspective. He was smiling the whole time Rudy was going through that. He had to know. If he's all-knowing, he had to know how this was going to turn out. So he was smiling as he was working it out for their good. Rudy, you've retired now. You're adjusting. You hadn't completely retired. You serve on a couple of boards. Talk about that quickly, and let's talk about what's next for you. But I know you're not going away.
Right now, I've been serving on for about 12 years, the Cobb EMC board, the local co-op. We are one of the largest co-ops in the country. And beginning last September, I became the board chair. It's totally different when I do professionally. It's, managing the company. And we also own a company called Gas South, which is one of the largest natural gas marketers in the Southeast. So also sit on that board. So the board is really good opportunity to stay busy a little bit. I did, at the request of some folks, set up a consulting firm where I do kind of strategic consulting. Mainly what I've been doing just the last 6 months is doing some executive coaching, speaking to different groups, just helping people pull together plans, strategies to be successful. One of the things I've come up with lately is, the question is, are you built to win? Because a lot of times people think they won't know what they want to accomplish, but they forget they need to plan and they need to build a path to get there. So a lot of what I've been doing just recently, and I kind of hope to do a little bit more of it, is just helping people figure out, are they built to be successful? The board work, a little bit of consulting, and just really enjoying grandkids.
So how can they find you? You have a website, right?
Yeah, my website is stratcomsolutions.com.
STRATCOM solutions.com.
Strategic Communications Solutions, Stratcom Solutions.
Rudy, I say this to almost everybody that I talk to on these podcasts, which has been a lot. One day, people are going to be listening to this, and you and I are going to be dead and gone. And that's why I'm creating these voices. You've got little grandchildren that will grow up and listen to this. They will have children. What do you want people to remember about you, whether it's your family or those you work with and rub shoulders with in your career? What do you want them to remember about you?
I am all about giving advice. I've written a lot of letters to my daughters, and I will write letters to my grandkids. I don't expect them to remember that. What I hope is that they will remember how I make them feel. And I hope that's a good and pleasant memory. And I know I learned that from you. I've heard you say it many times. You can't remember what my Sunday school teacher told me, but I remember the way they made me feel. And so that I hope that's the memory. I'll have a gravestone somewhere that talk about when I began and when I died, and there'll be other things that hopefully people might remember me about. But the one thing I hope is that they will remember the way I made them feel, and I hope that is a joyful experience.
I can promise you it will be a joyful experience for them. You spent your life for others. You spent your life making people feel better about themselves. You have succeeded. You'll keep on succeeding. You're not done. You're not throwing in. We're about to go on a trip next week. Keep on keeping on. Rudy, this has been awesome.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.